We often take our public spaces for granted, the little park down the street, the main city square, but have you ever stopped to think about how they'd hold up in a real crisis? Well, the pandemic was this massive, unexpected stress test for the entire world, and it turned our everyday spots into these living laboratories, which really makes you wonder.
Just think about it for a second. During all those lockdowns, when we were all stuck inside, that little patch of green down the street, it suddenly became a lifeline. It was a place to get some fresh air, to go for a walk, to just see another human face, even from a distance. But was it actually designed for that? Did it work when the rules of the world changed overnight?
Well, to find some rare answers, we're going to head to the city of Erzurum in eastern Turkey. Researchers there did this absolutely fascinating study where they put two of the city's most popular public squares under the microscope to see how they really performed under the incredible pressure of the pandemic. So let's meet the two main characters in our story. These are the two squares in Erzurum that went head-to-head in this real-world experiment. And what's so interesting is that they have completely different ideas about what a public space should even be. Okay, so on one side, you've got Havuzbaşı Kent Maydani. You can see it's a very modern design, pretty big, but it's kind of sliced in half by this massive traffic roundabout right in the middle. And on the other side is Yakutiye Mizani, much more traditional, mixing historic buildings with lots of walking paths and green space. Two totally different philosophies right there. But before we dive into which one did better, we need to understand how they were actually judged. I mean, the researchers didn't just walk around and say, yep, I like this one better. No, they used a really specific framework to measure how resilient these places were in a crisis. First up is urban sufficiency. This is pretty much the most basic question. Is the space physically enough? Does it have enough seating, enough open area, enough shade to actually meet people's needs? Especially when all of a sudden you have to keep everyone 6 feet apart. Next, you've got urban flexibility. This one is all about being able to adapt. Can the space actually change? Is all the furniture bolted to the ground, or can you move it around? Could a plaza that hosts a concert one day be turned into a socially distanced market the next? A truly flexible space can roll with the punches. Then there's urban immunity. Now, this concept is so interesting because it directly connects the physical design of a place to public health. Is the space clean? Does it feel safe? Does being there actually promote your mental and physical well-being? Or does it just add to your stress levels? And all of this, sufficiency, flexibility, immunity, it all builds up to the big one, urban resilience. A resilient space isn't just one of these things. It's all three working together. It's a space that can take a massive hit, like a pandemic, adapt on the fly, and keep on serving its community when people need it most. So how did they measure all this? They used this, the Spatial Quality and Resilience Matrix. Think of it like their official scorecard. It let them break down and score every single aspect of these squares, from the physical stuff you can touch to the psychological way it makes you feel. A really detailed, data-driven approach. Okay, let's get to the first round of this competition, the physical design. When push came to shove, how did the actual nuts and bolts of each square hold up? And boom, right out of the gate, you see a huge difference. The social distancing rules obviously meant less seating, but the way the seating was designed made all the difference. Havuzbaşı, with its long, fixed concrete benches, lost more than half of its seating. Yakutiye, with more individual benches spread out, did way better, losing only 38%. And when you dig a little deeper, the scores tell a really clear story. Havuzbaşı's layout, rated poor. Yakutiye's, medium. Yakutiye also got a better score for its green space. But look at this. Both squares got a poor score for flexibility and all-season use. That's a critical weakness, especially for a place like Erzurum that has really harsh winters. So when you look at the final physical scores, well, it's not even close. Out of a possible 50 points, Havuzbaşı scrapes by with just 16.5. Yakutiye gets a much more respectable 26. In the physical showdown, we have a very clear winner. But hey, a square is more than just concrete and benches, right? It's about how it makes us feel. So let's look at round 2, the socio-psychological experience. There was this one piece of feedback from a user about Havuzbaşı that just says it all. They said the square became a place to pass through, not a space to enjoy. Wow, that is a huge psychological shift, and it points to a major design failure during the pandemic. And the data totally backs up that feeling. People felt a stronger sense of belonging and used Yakutiye more actively. But notice the similarities here. Both squares were only rated medium for safety. And critically, both of them scored poor on stress reduction. Think about that. At a time of massive collective stress, neither of these spaces was a place people could go to feel better. And the final scores really reflect this. Yakutiye wins again, 22-18, but it's a much closer race this time. The really crucial point here is that both of these scores are pretty darn low. Even the better designed square really struggled to provide the psychological comfort that its community so desperately needed. All right, so we've seen the physical scores, we've seen the psychological scores. Now it's time to put them all together and get the final verdict on the resilience of these two squares. The study's conclusion is blunt, and it is crystal clear. Havuzbaşı Kent Mayandana was officially rated non-resistant to the shock of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Yakutiye Meydana, our winner in both rounds, was deemed moderately resistant. The numbers behind that verdict are pretty stark. Havuzbaşı scored a total of just 34.5 out of 100. That score just confirms its design was simply not equipped to adapt to the new reality. It failed on both a physical and a human level. Now, Yakutiye's final score was 48 out of 100. And while that's a lot better, it's really important to realize that it's still below the 50-point halfway mark. It was better, sure, but it was still not nearly good enough to be considered truly resilient. So what can our own cities learn from this tale of two squares? Well, the lessons are universal. It shows us we have to design for flexibility, with things like movable furniture that can be rearranged overnight. It shows us we need to balance green, natural spaces with hard surfaces that people can actually use. But maybe the biggest lesson is that we have to think psychologically. How a space feels is every bit as important as how it functions. And a smaller but well-designed space is way more valuable in a crisis than a giant, disorganized one. And that brings us right back to where we started. The next time you walk through your town's main square or your little neighborhood park, I want you to look at it with new eyes. Look at the benches, the pathways, the open spaces, and just ask yourself, is this place truly resilient? Is it ready for whatever comes next?